In this week's big story, Police Commissioner Michael Matthews discusses crime and talks about where the RVIPF is at as it relates to prosecuting the 6 murders of 2017. Crime. No one really wants to talk about it, but it's a daunting reality that we all face. Now, here in the British Virgin Islands, 6 murders in the first 6 months of 2017. It's the highest on record since the 9 recorded in 2008. Now, to help us understand on the big story what the RVIPF is doing to ease the fear of residents, we have joining us Commissioner of Police Michael Matthews. So welcome to the big story, Commissioner.
Thank you.
All right, let's dive right in. Now, in December of last year, there was a public outcry, or at least in the latter part of last year, the public outcry increased. And by the end of the year, there were 4 murders. There seemed to have been an increase in gun crimes. And residents think that the situation is out of control. However, you feel differently. How do you justify your assertion that has been made elsewhere in the media that things are really not out of control when people feel differently?
Well, first of all, let me say that one murder is one murder too many anywhere in the world, let alone for a small territory like ours. So I don't belittle the figures in any shape or form. But factually speaking, what I've said is that when I hear reports that crime is out of control, factually speaking, crime is going down in the territory and has been for some time. Last year we recorded a 4% reduction in overall recorded crime. This year we're already on an 8% reduction and the trajectory is going downwards. We're also seeing more detections. Our detection rate last year peaked at 53%. That means that 53% out of every 100 offenders in this territory were being dealt with by the courts or being prosecuted in some form by the police service. Now that's not a bad record, but we can do better. But of course, what creates anxiety with our communities are the more serious crimes. It's all well and good me sitting here and saying, well, you know, thefts are down, break into cars are down, house burglaries are down. People want to know what I'm doing about keeping them safe from the very small group of dangerous offenders who are coming into our communities and using extreme violence. Now, as you've quoted, there's been 6 murders this year already, and my heart goes out to the victims and to the families of these most recent cases. But of course, I don't look in isolation at just the 6 cases. I have to look at all of the victims that have suffered at the hands of killers in this territory. We've been researching back as far as 2000, 2001 to see what that picture looks like. The sad picture that emerges is there's been 56 murders since 2001 in this territory. 56. And there's only a population of some 34,000 people here. So for me, that's quite a high number. Now, if there is any good news to come out of that figure, we have charged offenders in 29 of those cases. So again, we are catching over half of the offenders that are out there and committing these terrible crimes. That's relatively good news, but what about the victims that still haven't been caught, the offenders that haven't been caught, and the victims of those crimes? Well, I never give up on victims and their families. And I promised last year, during, as you said, some of that public outcry, that we would be looking back as well as looking forward. So 6 weeks ago, without making a big fuss and noise about it, I brought in extra detectives into the territory from the UK, all experienced officers, all experienced murder detectives, and they've been working alongside my murder team, and they've been doing what we call cold case review, looking back on those murders that are still undetected from the past, but also assisting in the current inquiries. Of course, it's a tragedy every time there is one murder in this territory. But the question I think we need to be discussing is it's not just about solving a crime. It's not just about solving a murder. This is about addressing a mindset that is prevalent in the society here, where some believe it's acceptable to carry a gun. Some believe it is acceptable to beat a woman in the street. Some believe it's acceptable to beat their children, leaving extreme injuries. There is this prevailing attitude in some minds in the territory that we have to change. And the police service can't do that alone. We can't be the panacea to all of the problems here.
Commissioner, and you said that you guys have brought in some expertise. What has been circulating in talks among communities is the fact that persons believe that for most of the cold cases, the perpetrators of those crimes does not exist within the British Virgin Islands. Is this something that you have been dealing with?
There is absolutely clear evidence to show that in some of the cases the offenders have committed these dreadful crimes and then left the territory. I can give you an example where we know one offender that we wish to interview for the case of murder, a historic case of murder. We know where that individual is, they're in the United States, and we are talking to the US authorities about how we can work out getting access to that person and getting them back to the territory. Of course, we're very porous. We're a group of islands. It is very easy for people to leave the territory after a serious crime. It is also very easy for people to enter the territory and commit crimes. And again, we are aware that certainly in some cases involving murder, people have come in and been brought in from the outside just to commit that offence and then leave the territory again. Now, of course, they're extremely difficult cases to crack. There is natural pressure and anxiety that comes from the community and the media for the police to give immediate results. But sometimes it takes a long while before those results will become evident. What I am pleased about is that I get regular briefings on the progress of all of our inquiries, all of our live inquiries. And what I can tell you is just in relation to the 6 dreadful murders that have happened this year, of course you're aware that we have charged in 2 of those cases already, but in the 4 remaining cases we are making extremely good progress in some of those inquiries. And I still feel confident that the offenders should be looking over their shoulder, because we are very close to proving cases, not just recent cases, but previous cases, where I believe we're going to be able to provide sufficient evidence for the DPP to charge.
To follow up on that, what you said, you are very close in cracking some of the others, the 4 others for this year. What has led to that level of success? Is it the community's involvement that you've been appealing for?
We have certainly had far greater assistance from the communities than we were getting, but I still appeal for more. People still need to come forward. People need to say this is no longer acceptable. This is our country and we're going to take it back from the criminals. But yes, that has resulted in people providing information, providing leads, giving witness testimony to what they saw, what they heard. But more so, it's also about the forensic opportunities that we've exploited. We've benefited from additional funding from central government that has enabled us to increase our capabilities in certain areas. And whilst I can't say to you today, next week or the week after you're going to see us charging somebody for these particular murders, what I can say is that the briefings I'm receiving are looking extremely positive at the moment.
Did that additional funding have anything to do with the request from the governor? And part 2, what has that funding been used to do so far? I see some new cars going around, so tell us what's being done resources-wise.
Sure. Well, first of all, the government last year granted me the authority to recruit new officers, and that came with a substantial increase in funding from the government. The government also agreed to replace some of our existing vehicle fleet, and as you've mentioned, you're starting to see, and over the coming weeks you will see more visible police vehicles in the territory. That's a good news story in itself, because many communities have told me that the force isn't visible enough in the communities, and there's no doubt about it. I sometimes have trouble spotting my own officers out and about in the current vehicle fleet. This new fleet is going to be highly marked, highly visible, and it's my intention that we continue to do that to make sure the community do see us about. But on top of that, of course, as you say, the governor issued a warrant earlier this year as he was concerned about a number of security issues that had arisen and that the funding wasn't sufficient to address those issues with the speed that they needed addressing. And certainly the additional detectives that I've just spoken about, as a result of that additional funding through the warrant, has meant that we could bring those additional resources into the territory, only on a short-term temporary basis, I hasten to add. This is not about bringing loads of expats in and taking local jobs. This is very temporary, very focused on a specific issue, and then they will leave the territory again. So it's a mixture, I suppose, is the answer to your question. I'm extremely grateful for the current government's support. The Premier himself chairs the National Security Council, remains extremely supportive to the force. But of course, I equally enjoy a very supportive governor, and not always do governors see eye to eye with government and vice versa. But I see it as a partnership approach where together we're working out what needs to be funded, how it needs to be funded, and how quickly it can be done.
And definitely the community is saying government cannot do it all. And most recently we have a group of musicians coming together through the support of the Lions Club of Tortola to stage a big fundraiser, and more than just a fundraiser, they are advocating for peace and unity within the community. Do you think that this will really make the impact that they are expecting it to make?
Well, first of all, I'm delighted with that kind of community response. You know, this is exactly what we've been talking about, you know, are the community responding in support of fighting crime in the territory? And that support comes in a whole manner of ways, doesn't it? You know, from community meetings where I've had local people facilitate me come along and talk to communities, all the way through to evenings with members of the community, the elderly, through to something like this, which was community generated. And I think that's the key thing here. The guys who were organising this came to see me, and as you say, with the support of the Lions Club, and as soon as they told me what they wanted to do and the reasons why they wanted to do it, I was really enthused. Not just because I think it's a great initiative, I was just enthused that a group of young people, young musicians, want to get together and want to put a message out. And it goes back again to that message I said earlier, enough is enough. We don't have to put up with this, and that is the point. The community does not have to put up with this offending behaviour. We do need more people to understand that message though, and through music, through role models and idols like some of our local performers are to the young people, it's a good way of getting a message across. Mm-hmm. The sad thing is, as we sit here today, there will be young people, and I say young people quite deliberately, although it's not exclusive to them, but there will be young people out there today who know that their friends are carrying guns, or that their friends are dealing in drugs to some of our young school children, or that they're using extreme violence in the home, and they're saying nothing. And there is always this problem about, being seen to inform. The reality is that unless we all stand up together, united, this is going to continue. And I, for one, do not wish to see, another year like 2008. So, my message is, let's get together as a community, let's work together, police and community, and let's recognise this is not just the responsibility of the police to solve this problem.
All right, one last one before we wrap things up. Early on in the discussion, you spoke about the porous borders, and it's not the first time that I've heard you or anyone else in the territory speak about that. But is there a plan afoot?
We are about to, it's with the governor at the moment, I've written a draft 3-year plan for the force, a strategic plan that would explain, it'll be a public document, it will explain to the public what we're going to do, an attempt to do to tackle not just crime but security issues such as some of the open borders, because of course having open borders is an attraction as well for people. It's a big tourist attraction to be seen to be fairly free to move around our territory, and that's a positive thing. But the answer is yes. I'm working very hard with our head of customs and our head of immigration. We're in regular meetings where we talk about joining up our resources. Already, we have joint patrols with customs and with the police service out on the water. So you have custom officers and police officers in the vessels together. But we're going to be doing more. Some of the funding that you spoke about earlier on has gone into refurbishing the police launch and making sure that our police marine capability has all of the equipment it needs to be able to respond to incidents on the water. And in addition to that, we are joining up our intelligence. So we're starting to share more and more information with each of the other agencies.
Shortly after that discourse with Commissioner of Police Michael Matthews, the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force disclosed that 2 persons were charged in connection with the murder of Franklin Foy. Kenaz Hazel, 21 years of age, of Purcell Estate, was charged with conspiracy to rob, while Rebecca Persad, 26, of Josiah's Bay, was charged with perverting the course of justice. On the night of January 6 of this year, owner Frankie Foy and patrons of Foy Boys Bar, also known as FNS Bar in Longlook, were held at gunpoint by a lone gunman. Foy was fatally wounded, while a patron at the bar was robbed of jewelry and money.